constituency.
One thing, we have a lot of youths, and we also have a lot of free time for the youth. So I would like to see more youth activities taking place, especially now as it's the vacation.
A very good afternoon, one and all. Let me welcome you to this third public hearing of this, our joint select committee on national security, pursuant in particular to this committee's inquiry into the key issues and recommendations of the final report of the Police Manpower Audit Committee. Let me indicate that this hearing will be broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Let me, on behalf of this committee, welcome you, the members of the Police Service Commission and the Deputy Director of Personnel Administration, and of course the Acting Director as well, to introduce yourselves for the benefit of the record and for the benefit of the public who is, as I suggested, viewing these proceedings. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairman, Mr. Fitzgerald Hines, and other esteemed members of the Joint Select Committee on National Security. I am Dr. Maria Gomes, and as Chairman of the Police Service Commission, let me say how much we appreciate this issue of national security as a fundamental concern for all citizens and the invitation to be here today. We all want to live in a safe society, and this general discussion on the police manpower audit report is important to us as it forms part of our constitutional mandate as an oversight body for the TTPS executive, and by extension, the TTPS in all its very important undertakings. The Police Service Commission is acutely aware of the alarming culture of violence and the escalating crime situation in our beloved Trinidad and Tobago. We therefore applaud the efforts of the Police Manpower Audit Committee for their successful completion of this voluminous report. We note that given the importance of this document, we have had less than 1 week to review it, but the Commission has made several attempts, and we are here nevertheless. The Police Service Commission sees our role as an integral part of facilitating the transformation of the TTPS. May I now introduce our team today. On my left, Kavita Basarat, Assistant Director, Research and Evaluation from our technical team. The Director, Personnel Administration, Ms. Prabhawati Maraj, and the Deputy Director of Personnel Administration, Ms. Marcia Pilo Brady. On my right, to my extreme right, Mr. Dinanath Ramkisoon, Commission Member, Commodore Anthony Franklin, and immediately next to me on my right, Ms. Alison Coriat, Acting Executive Director of the Police Service Commission. Having introduced everyone, I would again just reiterate that we are here to respond to the call for a discussion. As I said, we haven't had this document for very long, actually not even a week, but we are here nevertheless because it is an important exercise and we see it as beneficial to the Police Service Commission. So thank you very much for the invitation.
We would like to thank you for your introductory remarks and you having introduced the persons who have appeared with you for this session today. Let me introduce myself for the record. I am indeed Fitzgerald Hines, chairman of this Joint Select Committee on National Security, and I'll ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Richards on my right.
Good afternoon to members of the Commission. Paul Richards, member.
Robert LaHunt, member.
Good afternoon, Saddam Hussein, member.
I am Randall Mitchell, member.
Good afternoon and welcome, Nicole Olivier, member.
Good afternoon and welcome, Nigel De Freitas, member.
Thank you very much. And we are ably assisted by a strong secretariat, led, of course, by Madam Jackie Sampson Miguel in her capacity as secretary to this committee and, of course, others. I did appreciate your recognition of the reason why you are here and your importance and significance in the context of the business of national security. The citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are particularly challenged and stressed by the burdens, physical and psychological, in the context of fear, deep fear, about the issues of crime taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. The police service is our premier organization which has, as part of its responsibility, to protect us from crime and criminals, to interdict crime and criminals. And you play a very key role in the very diffuse management of the police service. The Police Service Commission, which you are, was established under the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Actually, in Section 122 of the Constitution, Section 122, subsection 1, states that there shall be a Police Service Commission for Trinidad and Tobago, which shall consist of a chairman and 4 other members. Subsection 3 says, the president shall, after consultation with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, nominate persons who are qualified and experienced in the disciplines of law, finance, sociology, or management to be appointed as members of the Police Service Commission. Section 123 of the said Constitution, under the side note or rubric, Powers of the Police Service Commission, says, and I quote, Section 123, subsection 1, the Police Service Commission shall have the power to, A, appoint persons to hold or act in the office of Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of Police. B, make appointments on promotion to confirm appointments. C, to remove from office and exercise disciplinary control over persons holding or acting in the offices specified in paragraph A, as I have just read. D, to monitor the efficiency and effectiveness of the discharge of their functions, meaning the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioners of Police. E, prepare an annual performance appraisal report in such form as may be prescribed by the Police Service Commission, respecting and for the information of the Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner of Police. And F, to hear and determine appeals from decisions of the Commissioner of Police or of any person to whom the powers of the Commissioner of Police have been delegated in relation to appointments on promotion or as a result of disciplinary proceedings against a police officer appointed by the Commissioner of Police. To put that in language that those who are listening to us might more easily understand, your role and function in F, as I have just read it, is to allow you to hear and determine appeals that come from the police service under the hand of the Commissioner of Police or persons who he would have delegated inside of the police service to carry out the functions of listening or treating with disciplinary matters. And as well, the Commissioner would have appointed persons on promotion. If there are any appeals in that regard, you are also fitted with a mandate under this Constitution to hear and determine those issues. So essentially, and it is known to us that your role and function was far wider and deeper prior to 2007. All that I've just described is, in my view, in our view, a truncated platform since 2007, apparently very straightforward and easy to grapple with. I would like to begin by asking Madam Chairman, on an understanding that you have been established under the Constitution and you do your business in your own, as a commission, deliberate judgment, and you are responsible under the Constitution for so doing. I would like to recognize, yes, that you function on the principle of independence, because the country knows that the service commissions generally were brought to bear when we became an independent nation, largely with a view of insulating public officers, in this case police officers, from appointment and dismissal and discipline by persons who might have political or other agendas. It was really established to protect the public service, and an understanding that the public service is a piece of technology that is in place to serve the nation, and it's a transferable technology from one political administration to the next in a seamless manner without interference from politicians or others, so that we do understand, in that sense, your independence. But for the benefit of the record and for the benefit of the public, I would like you, Madam Chairman, on behalf of your commission, to begin this interface by telling us, how do you view, how do you interpret this concept of independence?
Well, in terms of interpreting the concept of independence, while, as you say, things seem seamless, we as a commission are certainly not independent from the point of view that we have no financial autonomy. There is maybe interdependence with regards to the Service Commission's department, because the DPA is our accounting officer. And in terms of resources for the Secretariat, which is our support, we rely solely on the Service Commission's department. in terms of supplying us with those resources, whether they're financial or human resources. And so the independence that you mentioned, certainly in terms of insularity from the politicians, etc., that is there. But in terms of being able to function on our own, we really have to ask for everything that we need.
All right. Now that you have gotten that far, let me ask another question of you for the benefit of those who would hear us and this committee. You, the Police Service Commission, appointed by the President, you do have, how many of you appointed by the President, the members of the Commission?
Right now, there are 4 of us. We are still short of 1 member.
Yes, but you do have a quorum and you are able to operate.
Of course,
Yes.
we have a quorum.
Right.
This is the quorum.
Yes, of course. But you do have a secretariat. Do you?
Of course.
Could you describe that secretariat so we can understand? Since you raised the question of resources and your dependence on others for it, you do have a secretariat. Could you help this committee with understanding the structure and the population of that secretariat? How many, what are the officers, that sort of thing. If you can't immediately do it, maybe one of your other officers
Yes,
might.
I will ask the DPA.
Thank you very much. So we could understand the
We could do it
resource
faster,
question
I think.
promptly.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman and members. Just trying to pull it up with my phone. Okay. The Police Service Commission Secretariat, it is headed by an Executive Director, Human Resource Management, which is an established position. There are different sections at the Secretariat. You have the administration, there's a legal section, there's a research and evaluation, a monitoring and evaluation, a public education section, and an appeal section. In the administration, you have a senior human resource advisor. In the legal section, you have senior state counsels. The research and the research section you have is headed by an assistant director, and so is the monitoring section, the public education section. And under them, they have their support staff, for example, statistical officers, research officers, and business operations assistants. Audit analysts, human resource advisor.
Altogether, about how many persons? Altogether, about how many persons are we talking about altogether?
Yeah, 26. About 26 or 27 persons.
All the staff of the Police Service Commission?
Secretariat.
Of the Secretariat. And you still have access to the DPA's administrative platform as well?
Well, the Service Commission is headed by the DPA, and we have different secretariats for each of the commissions. So the Police Service Commission Secretariat, they are 27 persons, and they are structured like this.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Let me give way to Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Madam DPA, what we would like you to describe the organization as well as the operational relationships. By that I mean the reporting relationships, because what is coming across is that the Police Service Commission has a secretariat with a reporting relationship to that Police Service Commission, where, from my recollection, the Secretariat falls within the organization of the Service Commission's department, and that Secretariat reports to the DPA, but offers support services to the Police Service Commission. So if you can just elucidate on that, because that is a point that needs clarity.
So in terms of the structure of the Service Commissions Department, as I said, we have 4 commissions. each of the commissions, under each of the commission, there's an executive director, human resource management. So, for example, the Public Service Commission, Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the Police Service Commission, and the Teaching Service Commission. So they report to the DPA or the Deputy DPA, depends on which one has oversight of that commission. In terms of the human resource functions, the accounting functions, office management type functions, those support functions. The Police Service Commission that secretariat is a bit different from the other secretariats in terms of the specialties there are there, in terms of the research capability or what is required, because the chairman read in terms of the role and function of the commission. What is different from the other commission is the monitoring function, that monitoring and oversight, and where you do the performance appraisal for the Commissioner of Police and the deputies there. So it calls for a different skill set at the Secretariat that is different from the other commissions.
With respect to the reporting relationship,
The
reporting relationship, is it to the DPA or is it to the Police Service Commission?
As I said, in terms of the support functions, the accounting function, the human resource function, the corporate services function, they report through, well, the executive director reports to the DPA. In terms of the technical aspect, that is where you have the dual reporting relationship.
And if there is a challenge with the Secretariat with respect to vacancies and an HR challenge, who is responsible for filling those vacant positions? Who is responsible for the capacity of the Secretariat, the Police Service Commission Secretariat, to do its job, let's say, efficiently? Okay,
so there are officers that are established officers and contract officers, as you would have it. The Service Commission, the DPA, would really see about that part of the function in collaboration with the Commission. So recently we had an exercise where the Commission and the chair of the Commission was chair of that particular committee to look at the staffing of the Secretariat. And I think that report is currently before the Cabinet. The Commission itself, we would collaborate. So take, for example, there was one office that the Public Management Consultant Division replaced by an established office. And in having that office there, the Commission recognized that you needed a technical director because it was more of an administrative office, and the technical skill set was missing. So the Public Management Consultant Division of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications, they created that contract office of the director, monitoring, evaluation, education, that technical director. So we are responsible for the staffing, and we would advertise the officers, we would go ahead and fill the officers, and with the collaboration of the Police Service Commission.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon again. One of the major responsibilities of the Police Service Commission is in terms of evaluating the effectiveness and efficiency of the two posts which fall under your purview, that is the Police Commissioner and the Deputy Police Commissioner. What I want to ask, because I've been trying to get this for a while now since I've been in this committee, what is your role in terms of setting the benchmarks in relation to the appraisals for the Police Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner? In other words, in my mind's eye, I would think that the Police Service Commission would, either by international standards or otherwise, have benchmarks which they set under particular criteria upon which they then appraise both the Police Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner. I have since been made to understand it doesn't really work that way. No. So I'm wondering two things. One, where would you get that criteria from, or who has the major responsibility of setting the criteria and the benchmarks? And are you aware as to whether it meets international standards? And thirdly, has it been updated since you've been commissioners on the Police Service Commission? When was the last time was it updated?
Okay, so as far as the DPA's, the Office of the Director of Personnel Administration is concerned, that is more for technical functions. So as it concerns the appraisal of the police, the Commissioner of Police, the Police Service Commission, and the chair would be in a better position to answer that.
Okay. So in terms of the performance appraisal, what basically happens is the technical units, alongside we've hired a monitoring and evaluation consultant. She's no longer with us. It was 2 short contracts to update that so that we are going with the global standards, etc. And if I may, then let me turn you over to the Assistant Director, Research and Evaluation, Ms. Bassarat, and she'll be able to elaborate more on that.
In terms of the appraisal of the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners of Police, which the Commissioner is empowered to do under Section 123(1)(e) of the Constitution, we utilize a 360-degree framework which enables us to collect a variety of data and ratings from a number of sources, internal and external to the police service. So one of the things that we do is we monitor the implementation of their annual policing plans. We give them an opportunity to participate in the rating of themselves and each other's by telling us what were their strengths, challenges, issues encountered, how as members of the team they would have affected each other's performance. We also do focus group meetings and interviews with key stakeholders. We do an annual public perception and satisfaction survey with 1,000 to 1,500 members of the general public. We do an internal survey of the police service on an annual basis. In that instance, we look at about 700 to 1,200 members of the police service, depending on what resources we have available throughout the year. And in that survey, we survey regular members of the police service, SRPs, and civilian staff. We also have internal focus groups with internal First Division officers of the TTPS. And finally, interviews that are conducted by the Police Service Commission on a triannual basis to interrogate the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners of Police about decisions that they are taking and issues affecting the public.
If I may just ask a question. Now, you indicated that part of the assessment, you do a 360-degree survey. Now, my understanding of how a 360-degree survey works is that you would interview persons who are below the level of the subject at the same level and above. So my understanding, in terms of the Commissioner himself, though, I mean, how do you get persons at the same level and above? So I don't see a 360-degree being able to work for the Commissioner. And secondly, I certainly would like to get an understanding then of how you determine the criteria, the total set of criteria under which you do your evaluations.
That issue about the pay appraisal and not being able to get persons above his level or at his level, we use the other members of the executive team who are his peers in a sense, not directly, so his deputy commissioners of police, because they do work as a team. They have shared actions and shared goals that they are all pursuing. I'm sorry, other part?
No, I'm just clarifying, but for a 360-degree to be a true 360, you have to have persons at the same level and above. So for the deputy commissioners, I mean, there are a number of them, so you get subordinates and at the same level. But you really do not have, there's only one commissioner. And who does he report to that you are getting that superior relationship? So I'm just saying that you cannot do a 360 for the commissioner himself.
You seem to be going to Sweden. Now let me say this. You may not have been able to ingest all of the contents of the final report of the Manpower Audit Committee, but you would have perused it over the past week, as you indicated. It appears at first blush from that report that things are pretty bad on and with that important organization, the police service. I want to ask, The question of discipline is very, very, very critical to an organization such as the police service. Discipline. And you are responsible for final appeals in that regard. I want you to give us an idea on an annual basis, perhaps the last year or so, approximately how many of these would have come to you. I want you to give us an idea as to how long each of them would take to be disposed of once it comes to you. I want you to give us an idea as to whether you have a time schedule, a standard operating procedure to make sure that when it comes in, it runs on a conveyor belt and goes out very quickly, because discipline from that report is a major issue and drawback in relation to the police service. And your role, as I described in the Constitution, is very germane to that. So one, I would like you to share your thoughts on those matters, and then I will invite Member Richards to address you or to ask a question of you. Please. I want to get an idea as to your workload. Perhaps over the last 2-3 years, how many appeals would have come in from the police service? How swiftly you would have dealt with them? Do you have a conveyor belt process that it comes in on and goes back out inevitably in quick time? Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'll attempt to answer the question. In terms of appeals, it is appeals against the Commissioner of Police and his decisions.
From tribunals, disciplinary tribunals in the police service. Mm-hmm. Yes. So for the benefit of the public, an officer breaches the police service regulation or some kind of misconduct, and it falls to the police regulations for discipline. The commissioner delegating a superintendent, a one-man tribunal, as they call it, or a three-man tribunal, to listen to the matter and to determine it. The officer then decides he's aggrieved by the outcome of that process, and he now appeals to you under the constitutional provision. Please.
From my understanding, a lot of the appeals, they go to court rather than to come to us. Be mindful that this commission is a part-time commission. And so in terms of our appeal function, we don't have as many as we would have had in 2015. We were able to reduce the appeals we had by 2 cases taken precedent. I think we were able to knock down maybe 160-something cases based on that, and this was when we had Commissioner Addison Khan, who is now deceased, heading the appeals tribunal. One of the things that we recognize is the need to bring on, let's say, a retired judge, etc., onto our appeals unit, because we do not have the resources, all of us being part-time, to head the, to deal with appeals. But we do not have many cases right now. I cannot provide how many we have, but it's not, and I could send that for you all, but we don't have many appeals.
So
right
let
now.
me understand you, for the benefit of my own understanding, our committee's understanding, of course. You're saying that, one, a very minor number of appeals come to you as provided for in the Constitution. And the reason for that might be most of the disgruntlement from the police disciplinary procedure finds its way in the courthouse.
Yes.
Perhaps the subject of judicial review. Mm-hmm. Am I correct?
Yes.
And that came out of 2 decisions of the court. You said?
No, not of our appeals unit.
Okay.
Our appeals unit, when we had Mr. Addison Khan heading it,
yes.
He and Mr. Martin George were the main persons on the appeals unit at that time, and they were able to utilize 2 particular cases which set a precedent for getting 160-something off.
Oh, I see. So you had about 160-something cases, and they were able to use 2 cases as a bit of a precedent
yes.
for the police service.
Yes.
So when they shared that with the police service, that caused a number of these appeals to be struck off your list. In other words, they were now dealt with inside of the police service.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
Is that the understanding?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And therefore, in which case, if what you have just said is true, well, not if what you have said, accepting what you have just said, it means that your role and function is further truncated, quite apart from the constitutional amendments that truncated it in 2007 in a very practical way because of the two cases of which you spoke. Less appeals come to you now, and therefore your workload in a practical sense is further reduced. Am I correct?
Partially.
Tell me how the other part
Okay.
is relevant. How am I not correct?
Okay. In terms of the appeals function, it is less. But in terms of the other functions that we have, for instance, our monitoring and evaluation of what the TTPS, of what the TTPS actually does. What this calls for is a flexing of our mandate, where we have to drill down and interrogate more of what the commissioner and his deputies do. So for instance, let me see what example I could give. If we look at, let us say, the police academy.
Yes.
And we're doing monitoring and evaluation there.
Yes.
It is not an audit function where you're looking to put a check mark on how many officers have attended this course and that course.
Yes.
We have to now look at content and look for relevance then in terms of how is that affecting the crime situation, how effective and efficient are these officers that are going out.
Okay, so in essence what you are saying, before I go immediately to Senator Richards, in essence you're saying, yes, while your appellate responsibility has significantly shrunk, your monitoring and evaluation function is now escalating.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon again to the Commission. Thank you for joining us today. Just two quick points before I ask my substantive question. Madam Chair, you indicated there are 27 persons in the Secretariat. Are all those positions populated presently? So you have full complement in the Secretariat?
No, we don't. We don't have a director of monitoring and evaluation. We do not have a financial analyst. We have not had a financial analyst since 2014. We are hopefully getting one in the new year. What we did, the DPA mentioned that PMCD did some needs assessment and process mapping of the organization. And in doing that, we knew that that position was vacant since 2014. But given the slow turn of the bureaucracy, and you have a job description that needed changing, and terms and conditions that needed changing, we have been able to, the Commission has been able to revise the job description, and that is now with the CPO's office in terms of being able to upgrade, because the kind of interrogation we want to do without having a financial analyst to do that, we haven't been able to fully appraise the commissioner and his deputies in that particular role. He is his accounting officer. He completely manages the TTPS, and there are areas of, let's say, cost-benefit analysis that we would want to do. Let us say, for instance, in terms of the police youth clubs. The police youth clubs, that hasn't, money's been spent there. And in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, nobody has done that, even looking at the budgeting and so forth there. So that we are deficient in those two important areas, and I'm glad that the opportunity is coming for us to publicly raise that, because then it means that our efficiency in terms of monitoring and evaluation can't be as effective.
Thank you. My following questions, I'm glad for that clarification, are pretty incremental, because I'm presuming part of this is for the general public who are watching and listening. to also understand your responsibilities, roles, and the challenges that you have in fulfilling those. In terms of the monitoring and assessment, what are the categories that, because we've heard some information from Professor Desaran and his team, what are the categories by which the Commissioner and his deputies are presently adjudicated on? The broad categories.
The broad categories are maintenance of law and order, public trust and confidence, human resource management, strategic leadership management, and communication. Those are the broad categories.
Right. Where those are concerned, you indicated earlier on one of your team that you use a combination of self-rating, peer rating. How are these instruments for assessment developed, and how do they compare to international benchmarks?
Let me ask Ms. Bassarat.
The self-rating, peer rating, and even the COP rating form, where the Commissioner has an opportunity to rate his deputies, are all developed in line with international benchmarks and good practices in team appraisals and evaluation.
Very often, if we're using international instruments, there is a presumption that several of the conditionalities that exist in those jurisdictions exist here, so that the instruments are valid in these jurisdictions. Has that consideration been taken where those situations may not be equal or applicable in Trinidad and Tobago, especially when you're using self-rating instruments and peer rating instruments, and then trying to compare the two with some sort of process or protocol for generating the data and analysis and interpretation of the data to come up with what should be a foolproof assessment of these critical positions?
Yes, we have considered that. In fact, the first time when we piloted it, we consulted the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago in lending their expertise and helping us to design those forms. And even after the first time we implemented, we got feedback from the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners of Police about how they think it can be modified to suit what we are doing. So we have tested it, we have done our research, and now we have some sound instruments that we're using.
In the absence of a financial manager regarding the assessment of the financial management component of the assessment, how is there a rating scale regarding the coding and the rating of the 5 broad categories you've outlined, including law and order, HR, financial management, strategic management, and public confidence and trust, in terms of coming up with the overall data generation and assessment and interpretation of those results? Because I'm presuming there's some sort of scientific basis for this process and assessment.
While I am not on the technical team, I want to assure you that in utilizing the expertise of Dr. Lenise Batiste, who is an international monitoring and evaluation expert, she has worked with several organizations, including doing work with the Citizens Security Program, etc. So that in terms of, I don't have the expertise to tell you that it's scientifically done. Unfortunately, I'm saying that, and I'm being very honest here. But I will tell you that in testing the surveys and all the other categories of information that has been used to do the performance appraisal, she is sound, and the technical team that we have, it meant actually a change of culture for even our technical team, because the 360-degree framework was not being used before. And so that has been an upgrade for us in that sense. We are not just following international standards. We understand the question of the cultural nuances of Trinidad and Tobago. We understand that of the TTPS as well. Because if I should just say, in terms of the initial rating, peer rating, etc., remember, you're looking at batches of people, and there's a batch culture and all of that. So it is a shift, a cultural shift for them as well. And the way we do the oversight, it's not a watchdog oversight. While we know we have the authority to discipline, it is more collaborative because they want a safer Trinidad and Tobago. We want a safer Trinidad and Tobago, and so it is done in collaboration.
We're not having it.
Very true.
Just two quick questions to wrap up before I pass on to my colleagues. And it really has to do with this process for evaluation. And this is not targeting any particular individual. Instruments that are international instruments have to be known for a particular culture and jurisdiction. Otherwise, they will not be valid or reliable in terms of data generated or interpretation of that data in terms of the assessment. And secondly to that, with that said, how much does your, because I'm presuming you're doing assessments of your own processes as you go along, especially when you're changing protocols. And I know you only had a week to look over this Manpower audit, but are there huge discrepancies in your internal compared to this external report? And how, if so, are there surprises or are there commonalities that you can identify?
I think having an opportunity to review the Police Manpower Audit Committee report, there have been no surprises to the Commission and its Secretariat.
Repeat that, they have no surprises.
There are no surprises to the Commission and Secretariat. Much as what is recorded in the report about the insufficient resource utilization and deployment, improper record management and financial recording, the high overtime bill, the management of extra duty, management of overtime, the unavailability of real-time human resource data, high failure rates in promotional and entrance examinations, the lack of a systematic approach to transfers and transfers and deployment, the issues surrounding the SRPs, the use of the SRPs, the disciplining of the SRPs, the recruitment and training, this internal disciplinary systems within the police service.
So this is...
We are, yes.
Yeah.
We have read it, so we understand, but you're saying in essence, there are really no surprises.
That's correct, because
Good.
we have been
Senator.
quite vigilant with our monitoring also.
Thank you. You do 2 assessments a year? Is that correct? You do 2 assessments a year? Or 1 assessment annually?
We do an assessment annually, and the monitoring is ongoing. It's done throughout the year.
So if there are no surprises, then what is in this document has been reflected in your assessment so far? Or are there discrepancies in your assessment reports and what is reflected in this document by the Police Manpower Audit Committee? Or variation, sorry, not discrepancies.
These are reflected in the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners of Police, their annual assessment. As part of the ratings and scoring they receive, but also as part of the development plan that the Commission would suggest to the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners about how to focus or refocus for the following year, and then the cycle starts back where those recommendations from the Commission are then again monitored by the Secretariat and reported back to the Commission.
Thank you. Well, you must recognize that the assessment process for the officers is of great concern to us. Now, the use of 360-degree is an excellent tool for evaluating management skills, and certainly management is important in the TTPS. But you wouldn't use 360-degree as the only mechanism for evaluating someone. It may be 50% of the weight as such, depending on how much you're on weight. But really, we'd like to get a sense of what other key performance indicators do you apply in that assessment. I mean, there must be some objective criteria, whether it's the extent of serious crimes, if there's moving up or down. But certainly the surveys and under 360 cannot be 100% of the assessment. So if you can tell us what other objective key performance indicators go into that assessment program.
Well, like I said, the surveys and those perception studies are just part of the framework that we use. In fact, all of those components eventually get into the 5 categories where we do our overall appraisal: maintenance of law and order, public trust and confidence, human resource management, and so forth. In maintenance of law and order, we do look at the crime rates, detection rates, and the crime reduction initiatives, road safety, for instance. So those are our broad areas, and what we do is we develop indicators and targets, and the commission, in consultation with the commissioners and deputy commissioners, will agree on targets for each of these criteria on an annual basis. And then the Secretariat will monitor whether or not we're on track to achieving those targets. In the area of public trust and confidence, we look at how public perceives their level of trust, their confidence in the police, their satisfaction with policing services, such as visibility and customer service.
How is that measured?
Public trust and confidence? We have a survey form that is constructed by the Commission in consultation with an external contractor who does the field work and analysis for us on an annual basis.
Okay. Just want to go back a little bit with what it is, because I think it was very revealing, that point of the fact that what you saw in the report, again, was basically consistent with what it is that you have been monitoring, seeing over a period, because the report was had some very revealing statistics as it relates to public confidence. It relates to confidence both in the police service and outside of the police service. It was very detailed in giving some information about human resource management or the lack thereof. Two, which I see were 2 important areas that were being monitored throughout. But what I would like to then ask, then, in light of the fact that it was not surprising what was in the report, and this seemed to have been there, what has been the work of the commission, the commissioners, or the group, in what actions have been taken over the years in addressing some of these issues? And am I to assume by some of these actions and your monitoring that it has actually gotten better? Or I can't see how it could have been worse than this. You almost make me frightened to wonder whether it was worse than this, or you see this as a better a position that was better than it was. So give us a little idea of what it is, if this has been there, no surprises. What are some of the actions that have been taken by the Commission in dealing with some of these matters?
Concrete actions.
One of the things that we can do, and we have been doing, the Commissioner of Police submits periodic reports to us, 6-month periodic reports in terms of fulfilling the operational plan and the strategic plan. Outside of that, we can call in the Commissioner of Police on any matters that we want to find out more about, whether it is we want a report on, let's say, day of total policing or anything like that, all right? So we have been able, we've called in the Commissioner of Police or Deputy Commissioners as we've seen the need arising on various matters. Let's say, for instance, in terms of some disciplinary matters or issues of promotion, which is glaring, because we observe then the whole question of succession planning within the TTPS, that there really is no succession planning. And what we are told a lot of times is that there is judicial review, there are things in court, and they cannot, in terms of that particular example, they can't move forward. So what we've done essentially is have them come in and have a conversation.
Situation.
Yes.
But Madam Chair, more specifically, the question from Mr. Lehant, Member Lehant, as I understood it, was having found that the things said about the police organization in that final report from the Manpower audit, consistent with what you have been finding all along, he wanted to know, on our behalf, what specifically have you as a commission done? What are your powers? How did you sanction those deficiencies? What did you do in relation to them? You did tell us that you would call in the police commissioner and you would have conversation with him. But in the meantime, as an end user of the police service, I find that the service coming to me was deteriorating. Crime is apparently getting on top of me. So I want to know what impact does or did the Police Service Commission have on the police organization to make my life as an end user safer? What in the last year or 2 or 3 or 5 has the commission done, having traced these very consistent and bothering issues as the final report reveals? That's what we want to hear. In other words, we want to assess what is the impact of the Police Service Commission on the police service in light of the trend and the trajectory.
Okay, we have asked questions about different matters. In terms of sanctions, I would say that we haven't been able to send anybody on leave or anything like that because that's not in our purview.
No, the Constitution gives you the right to hire and to fire and to discipline. The Constitution says so. I read it earlier.
Of course.
Yeah.
We know the Constitution says that. But if it is that we do not have the evidence that we need, because, first of all, let's back up a little bit. This document we got a week ago. All right, well, not even a week ago. But more than that, while there are no surprises, the information is revealing to us because they have been able to do a much more in-depth.
Great, but Madam Chair, Ms. Bassarat told us, and she outlined a number of aspects of the report that suggested that the findings in those aspects were consistent with your findings over time.
Okay.
So that's a given.
Right. So in terms of some of the issues we have asked for, one of the things that we saw in the document that we have asked for is an HR policy. The HR policy, the absence leave policy, the extra duty policy.
Have you received them?
We've been told that we would be getting them by the end of this year. All right?
Yeah, okay, all right, sorry.
Yes. So you realize that, sorry.
Again, and I just wanted just a little follow-up, if we could just press that point one more. Again, some other things, if I could just elaborate. One of the other areas for clear, the report was also clear as outlined by Ms. Bascom, the whole idea of public confidence, both inside the police service and external. I mean, what it showed in the report, and again, you're saying that this is information that you would have, again, it's consistent with what you would have known. So I take, for example, in that particular area, knowing the level of, or the lack thereof of confidence within the police service by members, and again, the public's perception. What have you done over the past 2-3 years in that particular area? So I'm zoning in now on that one. Was there anything that you could guide us to what has been done in that particular area?
One of the things that the Commission has done in terms of the community meetings and town hall meetings and so, members of the commission and members of the Secretariat have gone to some of those meetings randomly, and have noted the issues then that members of the public would raise, that we would then raise with deputy commissioners of, in terms of particular issues that may come up in particular areas, whether it's noise pollution or crime or whatever. And as I said, it really is trying to dialogue with them to get things going. Because as you rightly have said, and we make no bones about it, the police service is really not in the shape it should be in. And so there is no one or there are no one or two variables or three variables that will that we can pinpoint then that would make a difference. It has to be a very holistic approach to dealing with the issues of the TTPS.
I'm a little bit confused because I'm listening to everything that's been said in relation to the questions being asked, and I'm hearing statements such as, the police service is not in a good state. But then you have appraisals that are coming out that are good. The report would have indicated that the state of the police service as it is now is not something that would have happened yesterday, would have began a long time ago. So you would have different police commissioners being responsible in relation to that. So this is the question I really, really want to ask. You have these 5 general areas which are set against international benchmarks. You've had consultants come in and tell you these are the areas that you need to look at when assessing a police commission and a deputy. You then have criteria under each one and targets set in collaboration with the police commissioner themselves and yourself. First question, and I have a series of questions, Mr. Chairman, if you would permit me. How do you know what is a good target? If the police commissioner comes to you and says, 10% detection rate is good enough, what is your response to that? That's the first question.
Okay. Well, one of the things that the commissioner would say, and this is where we have to have the dialogue with him, he would talk about stretch targets and the ability to motivate his officers. So he can't have the target too stretched because they won't ever reach the target. So he's looking to motivate them. But I understand what you're saying in terms of how do we arrive at the target. We cannot arrive at the target in abstract. It must be in consultation with him and with his deputies, because they're the ones on the ground fighting the crime, and they're the ones that are supervising all of their staff. So we can't just out of thin air come up with a target. So it has to be in collaboration with him, and we could push him, but it must be done in collaboration.
But what I'm saying is that there's a discrepancy happening here, a gap, if you will. You would have just indicated that you admit and you're not surprised by the issues and recommendations being put forward in the report. But what I'm saying is that the way this system works is that there's a feedback loop that is supposed to make the system better. That feedback loop is this. If the police service is not where it's supposed to be, then an appraisal of the person or persons who are there to manage the police service would tell you so, and then you act as you have been giving powers under the Constitution to sort of get an individual who can help fix that. What I'm saying is that you are here admitting, as the body who has oversight over the police commissioner and the deputy police commissioner, and admitting that the police service is not where it's supposed to be. So we are getting down now to the appraisal, and I just indicated that in collaboration with the police commissioner and deputy, targets are set. All I asked is, how do you, as the Police Service Commission, know that the targets being set forth by the individuals who are supposed to meet that target is good enough? If they tell you 10% the detection rate is good enough for the country, how do you know? Do you go out there with a consultant and say, is 10% good enough? And then speak to the commission and say, no, it's not good enough. Let me tell you why. Public perception is one of the criteria which you are looking at. You cannot have a 10% detection rate and the public okay with that. So you're supposed to be able to say that criteria or target that you're setting does not match the other criteria. So what I'm asking is, out of all the commissioners on the Police Service Commission,
how do you know that the targets being put forward by the individuals who you are assessing is good enough? Because then they can set a low target, meet it, and then you get a good appraisal, but the police service is not doing what it's supposed to be doing.
All right. Well, that's the game. That's the game. Because if you set a low target, then you'll meet it easier. But we're not about games, because we are about serious crime, and that's one of the reasons that we're here. That's one of the reasons you have that report. So in terms of increase, or in terms of percentage, it's not just an arbitrary 10%. It must be as compared to last year. Where are you going with this? It is like, for instance, the issue of firearms, all right? If the commissioner says he has taken this amount of firearms, off the street, how many arms are coming in? It has to be in relation to that. And that's where you find that there is a deficiency, because in that sense, he's not responsible. And he will tell you this: I'm not responsible for the borders, the seaports. I'm not responsible for there. So it isn't as simple as it seems.
Indeed. Before I allow Senator Hussein to make an intervention, for your benefit, Police Service Commission, this committee had before us all the elements of the National Security Platform, including the SSA, the Strategic Services Agency, which is our premier intelligence gathering agency, and whose mandate was recently broadened to take into account all serious crimes as distinct from what it used to be, that is to say, narcotics and firearms. They told this committee, for your benefit, that they have done an assessment of the number of illegal firearms that exists in Trinidad and Tobago as at that time. And they gave us a figure. And when I took account of that figure, I considered, that was last year, that the police services catch of 745 firearms for the year was a jiggle and a piggle. And I consider in 2017 that their catch of 995 or so firearms is indeed a jiggle in a piggle. I want to suggest that you make contact with the SSA to the extent that you, because I did ask you about independence, and I understand from your response, and anecdotally, that independence means coming to your own independent, deliberate judgment. It does not mean you can't take advice and hear other people and interface with other people. Otherwise, independence would have lost its meaning.
Exactly.
So I would want to suggest in that regard that you make contact, and you have among you a man who is very familiar with those matters. Two men, two persons, let me say so, that I can recognize, and find out a little more about the number of illegal firearms that the intelligence agency, the SSA, assessed exists in Trinidad and Tobago. And immediately, your targets in that example will fall by the wayside. I give you an assurance of that. Senator Hussein.
Chair, thank you very much. I just want to send back the conversation to the point of discipline and the appeals process. Now, Madam Chairman, you indicated that most of the cases now go directly to the court, but as I understand it, in order for someone to get leave for judicial review, you must have exhausted all of your alternative remedies. And the appeal process would have been the exhaustion of that alternative remedies. Otherwise, the court would not grant you leave to file a substantive action for judicial review. So that bothers me, that cases now leave the police service after being disciplined, after a decision is made, and goes directly to court, when in fact it should go from the disciplinary committee to the appeal tribunal and then to the court. Now you mentioned, so I would like your views on that. Secondly, you mentioned 2 cases. I noticed that there are 2 senior state counsel. If you can get the names of those cases that you said would have struck out, I believe, 152 matters or so.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. These were not matters in the court. These were matters that came from the police service.
What I understood, it was a precedent that they used to trim down some of the...
Yeah, but I did not get the impression these were precedents from legal matters in the court. Am I correct, Madam Chair? I am correct,
okay.
Yeah.
Right. And one other question I want to ask is, when was the last time that the appeals tribunal would have met?
Okay, I will ask Mr. Ramkisoon to answer this question.
Good afternoon again, the members of the commission. I agree with you fully that, as you described, that the process should have been through the commission, but notwithstanding the process, people deviate from the process, and they go straight to the courts, and that's all a judicial function of the judge to determine or award costs as may be, as deemed fit by the judge. There are circumstances in which it is not followed. And the other aspect of the last time, I think I do not have the date at hand, but we'll be guided by.
I mean, for the 2 cases?
Hudson, yeah, the last time it's at. But it's Hudson, Craig Hudson. It would have been sometime earlier this year. The date, I cannot recall exactly, but it would have been sometime earlier this year.
Hard pressed, I mean, you know, if the law or the Constitution outlines a process for discipline, if one does not assume that process and goes to court, there can be a firm resistance state in the court for failure to following this process. Does the commission not take that position?
Yes, the commission would defend its matter.
Because there have been a number of matters against the Police Service Commission, I have noticed.
Yes.
Over the years, many years, since independence. But insofar as, if the law, or in this case, the Constitution permits a disciplinary process from the police service to the Police Service Commission by way of an appeal, but you see, an appeal is not judicial review. So if those matters go for judicial review, it might be a little bit different. Well, yes, yeah, but the court should be saying, if you highlight that to the court, that listen, there is a process here. Before you could come to me, you need to follow that. Unless, of course, if there are some other distinct grounds for judicial review. But that's a legal issue. Madam Chair, the Manpower Audit Committee spent, I think, about 6 months on the job. About 8 months? Yeah, they went in for a period and then they had an extension. So it was a limited period of activity. I think there were about 6 members of that team. They got a small secretariat from the Ministry of National Security. They co-opted with National Security. And in those 8 months, they were able to produce this report, which you have said produced findings that are consistent with your findings over years. If they could have accomplished that in 8 months with a borrowed secretariat, just take that from me. With a borrowed secretariat, before I ask that question, let me say this. You have 26 members of your secretariat, highly qualified people from what I have observed. All the positions are not filled, in particular the financial analyst position. Back in 2013, I think it was, because you did raise the question of resources for us here today. Back in 2013, you, the Service Commission, this Police Service Commission, in a document dated the 13th of March 2013, issued a report of the multi-sector review team on the Police Service Commission. Are you all familiar with that, although you would have taken office thereafter? Remember, this was the Police Service Commission. Are you all familiar with this, Madam Chair? It was a 2013 report, the multi-sector team on the Police Service Commission.
Yes, we're familiar with it.
Good. This, in part, tells us at page 47, and thereafter, pages 47 to page 62, the Police Service Commission was requesting a secretariat of 60 persons, 60. In the process, creating a new 18 positions. So some of the positions you now have, they wanted 2 and 3 persons in those particular positions. And along with 18 new positions, you wanted the Police Service Commission, this is, a total of 60 persons to work with you, the Police Service Commission. Do you, this presently constituted Police Service Commission, subscribe to this? Since you raised the question of resources.
There are amendments to that report in the police manpower audit. That report was done under the person audit who authored this document.
I'm aware.
This is not the
I know,
commission.
I'm fully aware, but
All
this is
right?
why I'm asking whether you, the currently constituted Police Service Commission, subscribe, accept this, and treat this, in a sense, as your own today.
No, we
Do
don't.
you want 60 persons? Do you want 18 new positions?
We have not discussed that. This commission has not discussed that.
But you raised the question of resources. You implied to us earlier today that you are short on resources.
Right.
Dependent on others for resources. And this is why I raised the question of that manpower audit, which in 8 months can have produced that report which you found consistent with your findings over time. I'm saying, do you really need more resources to understand what is happening with the police service and carry out that monitoring function, especially since we are learning that you don't have appeals to deal with anymore? I'll tell you why I'm asking this as I conclude for your answer. The Police Service Commission, and indeed the other commissions, have been the subject of much discussion in the national community over the years, in terms of their relevance even. There have been governments past which have declared and taken what some may consider to be hostile positions. There are governments that have found ways to try to circumvent the work and the existence of the police service and other such commissions established in 1962 under our Constitution. The reason for all of that is because there's a perception that these institutions, your and other similar institutions, are not serving the needs of Trinidad and Tobago today as it should. So we are interrogating this matter this evening with you. And we really want to be convinced that your resources and your cry for more resources and the impact you have on the police service is really justifiable to some extent. We want to understand how what you do impacts on the police service, its management, in light of all the problems the manpower audit discovered in 8 months. And we now have the report before us, and we have to make recommendations to the larger parliament and the implementation of some of the terms of that report in order to take the police service from where it's now at to a higher and a better place.
Related question, Trey.
Yes, indeed.
Related question. Just to add to that, and going back to something that has left me kind of confused, and I'd like some clarity on it. Madam Chair, in your opening remarks, you indicated that part of your remit is to aid in the transformation of the police service. And the chairman asked a few minutes ago, what definitively has the commission done to move the service forward from where it is to where I guess all of us, including the larger population, wants it? And part of the answer included, which left me confounded, that in adding that your assessments, plural, was very much reflected in this document, but you could not act definitively because you did not have the kind of evidence this provided. But Ms. Bazarath indicated that your assessment protocols and processes meet international benchmarks, and you are comfortable with those. So if those are not evidence enough to act decisively, because without consequence, and you really can't have changes in behavior. If you tell me I'm behaving badly, but I have no consequence for changing my behavior, I'm going to continue behaving badly. And I'm trying to figure out what more evidence than your self-confessed, reliable and valid assessment protocols that you have outlined that are consistent with this, that you need to recommend at least more defined action to transform those responsible to more productive and higher performance levels. Where's this evidence going to come from? Another Manpower audit? Or is it that you don't have confidence in your own assessments? Because that's what it's suggesting to me, if you're asking for evidence to act.
Okay. You indicated that I talked about in my opening remarks about transformation of the police service. We have several mandates, and one that is on the cusp of concluding right now, which I cannot talk about more at this point in time to compromise anything, is the selection, recruitment and selection exercise of a police commissioner and deputy commissioners of police. That, remember that we are a part-time commission. And in terms of that particular exercise, that has taken tremendous amount of time, energy, effort, holding off the media, etc., etc. That has been going on for the last almost, beg pardon? Almost a year and a half we've been doing that. And because the bureaucracy turns slowly, because we have not been able to get money, because recruiting the firm and looking at the proposal, etc., all those things. I don't want to go into that anymore. But that is one of our mandates, and that has been one of the areas that we have focused on. You asked me, what have we been doing? That is a big piece of what we have been doing in terms of trying to meet the needs of the national public in terms of crime. And even when that is completed, nobody, your side of the table or ours, nobody has a magic wand. We are talking about changing a culture of violence that pervades the society, that pervades the globe right now. So that nobody has a magic wand, as I said. And so in terms of the transformational issues that we're talking about, it is not just the selection process, but in every other area. And
if I could just interrupt you, it is not my intention for you to give any information here that will in any way compromise that process that you're indicating there, because we've been trying to be very sensitive where that is concerned based on asking you questions. But for example, the Manpower audit, and I'm presuming because you said nothing surprised you here, indicated that the human resource management systems, if not absent, are abhorrent. And if you can't manage your human resources, even commissioner process aside, what has been done, or what the recommendations of the commission to get something as critical as that resolved? Because that certainly would, if you say there are no surprises, that aspect, and Ms. Bazarat also alluded to that, has been one of the big challenges articulated in this Manpower document. And if that, to me, HRM is not sorted, everything else, because they're interrelated, everything else will be affected. You cannot effectively manage your officers, your contingents of officers to effect changes in criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. You cannot effect change in public confidence or trust. You cannot effect internal disciplinary processes. Everything falls down after that. So even in the absence of the broader picture of what you can't speak about now, obviously, what has been done to deal with that? Or what were the recommendations to effect change where the HR significant shortcomings are concerned?
We have asked for an HR policy. We have met with the commissioner on several occasions, asking about the various issues of promotions, the question of overtime, the question of sick leave, all of those things we have inquired about. And the response is usually we are doing a policy, we will get the policy by the end of this year.
You can understand, just quickly, you can understand how if you accept that and don't, as a commission, act decisively to deal with that, how the public can start to perceive that you're part of the problem.
Of course.
Okay.
If I may just address that, that question more succinctly. Given your acceptance of the state of the TTPS as indicated in the Manpower Audit Report, what role do you see the Police Service Commission being able to play in improving the performance of the TTPS?
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
What role, acknowledging the current state of operation of the TTPS, what role do you think that you can play as the Service Commission in improving the performance of the police service?
As the Police Service Commission, the role we have to play is very important. It means that we need to have the resources in order to do the job. If we don't have the resources, the human resources, the physical resources, all right, and the financial resources, to be able to do anything else, it is very difficult. So in terms of the recommendations of the Manpower Audit, it talks about an amended Police Service Commission, and that we agree with. Bringing in different organizations means you're just changing, you're changing to start over. If we think about this commission, when you talk about 1962, we could go back to 1956. That's how old this issue is, this commission is. But when you look at the new iterations of the commission in 2006 with the act change in 2007, it means the roles have changed significantly, because whereas we were looking at the entire police service, then it was reduced by Mostrovsky's report, etc., to where we are today. There are certain recommendations coming in that multi-sector report. They're talking about maybe going down to ACPs and looking at other protective services and so that there are issues there that we need to look at more fully. But in terms of looking at it without the resources, that's where we need to partner so that we could get things done.
Chair, from a very practical standpoint, you told us on 2 occasions that you are part-time. I would like to hear, this committee would like to hear, what do you mean by part-time? How many days do you actually work? How many hours per day does this commission do work? Let me get a sense of what you mean by part-time. You know, Stalin has a song about part-time lover.
Maybe I should take the Fifth Amendment here because I have another job, all right? But I'm at the commission almost every day because I work very close to my other job. It's very close to where the commission's office is. And in terms of fulfilling the needs of the commission, seriously though, in terms of fulfilling the needs of the commission, this commission is on call all the time. We're on call, and in terms of hours, we meet as a body for statutory meetings every 2 weeks. But outside of that, I would have to sit and calculate how many hours, because we've, particularly in terms of the selection and recruitment exercise, we are meeting very, very, very often.
One more thing. In terms of
I will do a calculation, because it would be interesting for me to know as well.
Yes, yes. You know, I promised Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me just go back to something Senator Richards asked. How many positions are there in the Secretariat?
I cannot say at the top of my head, but it should be around 35.
Okay.
Yes.
I've read a document where it's 40, 41.
We did we had a restructuring, a recent restructuring.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 35.
It could be around there, yeah.
And you have how many filled positions?
Well, what I could tell you, what we have not filled, the director monitoring, that's the technical director I referred to earlier, one financial analyst, and I think 3 transcription specialists. As far as I'm aware, those are the ones we are currently going ahead to recruit.
And apart from that, how many others aren't filled?
One communication officer, but I don't think they require that at this point in time. That's all I could tell you at the top of my head, yeah.
Okay, so, Madam Chairman, when you speak about the resources that the Police Service Commission really, does not have, we're talking about those positions as well as financial and otherwise?
Okay, in terms of the positions that Ms. Maraj is referring, in terms of that restructuring exercise, what has happened is that we've lost some institutional memory, because the persons who filled the positions initially, they were contract positions. And when the government decided that it wanted to go more into established positions than contract positions, people were on month to month, some people for how many? Up to 3 years, all right? And so you had people on month to month then, and then people were sent home. What happened in terms of bringing established persons from the establishment across to the Police Service Commission? These persons have no institutional memory of how we do what we do. And so you cannot take a statistician from wherever, or research officer, because that is an established position in the public service, and bring the person across. They don't have that knowledge. So the learning curve is steep, and that takes time for things to happen. So that has been a problem as well. And in terms of when the director left and there was the introduction of an executive director's position, which is when we asked for PMCD to come in, because the restructuring was taking place, unfortunately, without the consultation of the commission.
Right.
So,
okay, so there is an HR function with your HR problem with your secretariat. That's what you're saying.
We're now trying to give them, yes, to get them beefed up in terms of the nature of what we do.
Okay, and your monitoring and evaluation exercises or reports would have also picked up that there is a significant HR challenge with the police service itself. Mm-hmm. Yes. So, out of that report, is it now that when you meet with the commissioner, deputy commissioners, that you set objectives that will be appraised annually? So for example, if you determine through monitoring and evaluation that there is a significant HR management problem, deficit in the police service, you would meet with the commissioner or the deputy commissioner and say, listen, by this year, you must fix these things.
Yes.
Yes, that is true.
Yes.
All right, so obviously the commissioner has not met that. He has
Pardon?
not, the commissioner would not have fixed those things. Those things are not fixed.
No, no.
Out of the reports of the Manpower audit.
Right.
So what then is done?
And this is where the issue of sanctions come in.
Yes.
All right. And in terms of those, basically, we have to hear what the commissioner has to say in terms of why he hasn't been able to do the AP policy, the OSHA strategy, the, the health and wellness, all of the things then. And essentially, he would let us know, well, he can't do this, whether it is funding or whatever else, whatever the challenges he has, and we set new deadlines, and you go from there.
Let me just ask two more questions, just two more questions. So let me ask as well, and I don't mean anything by this, but just to paint the picture, the Police Service Commission, are they also appraised? Do you also have to produce a report or satisfy any key objectives to a particular office?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We have to do an annual report every year, and it goes to the president and comes to you all.
All right. So is it possible, and this is for members of the public, is it possible that members of the public, someone may come to the conclusion that because the Police Service Commission is insulated, the Service Commission's department is insulated, and the police service itself is insulated, that there potentially aren't any consequences because there are no sanctions that can be placed upon for non-performance?
Well, what we have been doing in, I would say, over the last maybe 6 to 9 months, we, just as the chairman, Mr. Hines, has been talking about, let's say, meeting with the SSA, we have met, we recognize then that the TTPS, if we take the TTPS and we put them in the middle of a triangle, we are at one end, national security is at the other end, all right? And you have the National Security Council maybe at the other end. And we need to be able to have dialogue with the people in that triad so that we can then be more effective in how we do what we do. Because if we have the TTPS and the commissioner and his deputies in the middle, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, then we have problems. We've also met with the PCA on that front. So there are things that we are doing, but as I say, things don't turn around as fast as we would like.
Before I give way to Senator Hussain, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to know if you'll agree with this submission. We argued that the management of the police service is very diffuse. To some extent, they are accountable to you, the Police Service Commission. To some extent, they are accountable to the Minister of National Security, the Cabinet. To some extent, they are accountable to the National Security Council. And it appears to the largest extent they are accountable to the courts under law. If the impression that one can get from our interface this afternoon is that serious sanctions have not, I'm not saying cannot, but have not been applied over the history of the existence of the Service Commission, and certainly around this time, then insofar as the management of the police service is concerned and accountability of the police service is concerned to the Police Service Commission, that's not very effective.
Yeah.
Will you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that, and that's one of the reasons that the commission is about to, we were trying to do it in November, but we have to revamp our police service regulations so that the sanctions we can put serious sanctions in place.
So
we could not do it in November when we had earmarked to do it.
You are about to hire a commissioner. I'm not dwelling on that for obvious reasons, but you're about to hire one knowing full well that he or she is not going to be fully, properly accountable to you. The management structure between you and that appointee is very, very weak. So you have accepted that. And then, insofar as the Minister of National Security, who conveys the government's policy to the police service, but is unable by virtue of the operation of law and practice to deal with the internal daily operations of the police service, the management of the police service by the minister is also very troubling, very weak in a sense. Because he can't tell the commissioner how to carry out his daily operational activities. He directs policy and he directs resources, and then we hope for the best. So it appears as though the only real accountability that the police service has is to the courts. So a lot of things end up in the courthouse and damages are made to be paid and for all kinds of malicious prosecution and so on. So when we thought originally, and I'll give way to Senator Hussein now, that there were different aspects of management of the police service, today we are beginning to discover that there's really hardly any management of the police service, and certainly the police service is not seriously accountable to any entity for its performance. And therefore the report says that we should have a police inspectorate. You saw that?
Yep.
And that there should be a police, what's the name? Oversight body. So this oversight body will establish standards and monitor these standards and its accomplishment in relation to the police service. And the inspectorate, that, not an inspector, an inspectorate, is expected now to go, or their job would be to see the extent to which these standards that have been set by this police oversight body are being observed and kept by the police service. You saw that in the report?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Tell us, in light of the obvious weakness of the Police Service Commission as we have established today with your agreement, in this regard, what are your thoughts on that? And then I give way to Senator Hussein.
Well, the first thing that I would want to say is that it's not that we've accepted. We've acknowledged that the Commission has a lot of challenges. What I want to suggest, or at least in terms of the Constitution, the Commissioner of Police shall have the power. So the Commissioner of Police is his manager. He is his own manager in terms of dealing with the TTPS. So in terms of the daily operations, he's the one in charge in lots of ways. The Ministry of National Security does certain things there, but he is essentially the one that is managing. He is the CEO, he is the financial, he's his accountant.
In a strict sense, and sanctions apply.
Right. That's where the Police Service Commission comes in. So coming now to your issue of the Police Inspectorate that is raised in the Manpower Audit and the Oversight Body. Right. My honest opinion and the opinion of the Commission is that the Commission, the Police Service Commission, the way how we are structured, that needs to be amended in terms of giving us financial autonomy, etc. Giving us the teeth to do what we can do. Bringing in another organization that you're going to start with a new name, I don't think that is going to make the difference. It may appease the public, it may appease the political directorate, but you're going to have to start somewhere. So I'm saying, why then dismantle an organization that you can improve? Because we have flaws, we have cracks, but those things can be fixed. And that's what I would want to say on that.
The Constitution gives you power to fire too.
Yep.
Has the Police Service Commission ever fired a commissioner or a deputy commissioner or disciplined them in a serious way? I think not. I can hardly remember that. Someone is whispering here, we've only had excellent commissioners. But that is a matter apart.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as you all know that at the end of this exercise, we will have to compile a report for submission. And I want to ask a question for the benefit of the public. It's a very simple question. Why is it so difficult to appoint a commissioner of police? And if it is so difficult, are we ready to elect a commissioner of police as recommended by the Police Manpower Audit Committee report?
Are you talking about the election? Having an election for Commissioner of Police?
That was one of the recommendations made. So my first question is, why is it so difficult to appoint? And if it's so difficult, should we then elect a commissioner? Because it's easier to elect.
In terms of the difficulty of recruiting and selecting a police commissioner, that's the first thing, all right? The difficulty with that, initially, when I became chairman, I asked the same questions, and one of the ministers of national security had come to us soon after I came on board and presented a document called Simplification of the Selection Exercise. And I remember saying, this is not such a simple exercise. And so we were dealing with a legal notice 101 at that point in time, which talked about recruitment. You could recruit a foreigner as well, okay? In terms of the legal notice 218 that came about in December of 2015, the commission was never even consulted about that. So that if you have legislation that has challenges, then the implementation of the legislation is always going to present further challenges. And so it would be wise in future, with whatever is happening, to consult the people who have to do the implementation. And I'm not saying consult in an arrogant way, but it is just the same way we are around the table here. To consult because the people who have to do the task would have a sense. So you can't create a policy or legislation in a vacuum. So that with the legislation that we have right now, we have been able to systematically address the issues that, in terms of the process, and we are almost there. So I don't want to say more in terms of that particular matter. So in terms of the election of a commissioner of police, I think that that was one of the poor recommendations of that document that the media chose to highlight. So the media looks at stuff and they choose the one that they think would be the most sensational, and we cannot allow ourselves to fall for that, or for the public to fall for that. And that's why we're here, and this is a public forum that people are hearing. We do not support the election of a police commissioner, because that would be utterly convoluted.
Madam Chair, as we approach very swiftly a conclusion to our interface this afternoon, I would like to know whether you have any immediate recommendations for the improved management and monitoring of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, so that we would consider that in our recommendations to the larger Parliament. If you find that too burdensome to grapple with now, we would be very happy to receive that in writing from you at an early stage, presumably before the 31st of December 2017. Preferably, rather.
Preferably, I like
because
that
you
word,
will agree,
preferably.
you will agree that the crime epidemic that you described so well earlier will not go on holidays for that holiday.
And
Ours is urgent
and it will
and
not
pressing.
be solved even if we were able to meet that deadline. But thank you very much. We will definitely deliberate on that.
You will notice that today is the 20th of December and we are here. And we'd
I
be
said
willing,
that at the beginning.
we'd be willing to come again before the 25th, you see? But if you have trouble, telling us some of those recommendations immediately, we'd be very happy to have them in writing. And our presence here today is really testimony to the fact that we understand that we have a bit of a crisis on our hands. And on that note, let me ask you, since you're a woman of candor, do you think that there's a culture inside of the Director of Public Administration's precincts and the Service Commission, a culture which simply just says things must take 2 and 3 years to get done?
I don't think
I'm asking, it's an honest question. And I'll tell you why I ask, because the public is of that view, and I'll tell you further. We had the Public Service Commission before this committee some time past, and they told us in writing that when a matter comes, a disciplinary matter, to them for treatment, it is expected that that will take 5 years. They told us that. So my question is not facetious. It's real. It's alive. Do you find, Madam Chair, that there is some kind of culture inside of this labyrinth, this secret and cloistered labyrinth that has been the Police Service Commission and the Office of the DPA, that just says things must go through very, 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 very slowly or never at all? Never come back out?
That is a very loaded question, and give me a second. I know your time is going. I could be very subjective and say yes. I could be very subjective and say yes. But because I'm on the inside now, as an outsider, I could look and say that. But being part of the commission and understanding some of the dynamics, I think that we are dealing with a highly bureaucratic organization, the culture of which they've tried to change. They've just finished institutional strengthening exercise, spent a lot of money for that. And the thing is, as we have all recognized, culture is one of the hardest things to change. You have to be able to change culture at the micro level, the individuals working in an organization, at the meso level, and at the macro level in terms of the entire bureaucratic organization. And you have, within that organization, I would admit you have some people who are bureaucratic elites, who have learned about a culture that they've been in for the last 20 years, and this is how it is done, and this is how it will continue. But we cannot stay that way because change has to happen, just as this document says. The change must come now, and sometimes it is in pushing certain buttons that things will change. So I would suspect, given sometimes the personalities, etc., some people are more pliable than others, things can move faster. I have seen that happen over time, the time that I've been at this commission, where depending on the personnel, we have some things happen faster, some things take a while, because it is about relationship building. You all know that. So to answer that question, it is a loaded question, but I think that the intention is to do what is necessary. But sometimes the the systematic and methodical way that some people interpret some laws or some policies and regulations, that doesn't have to happen. So we can have much more forward-thinking ways of doing stuff. So essentially, I would say that the wheels turn slowly, but if we are in a situation of change, I would think that they can step up to the plate, because they have the same problem that the police service has in terms of succession planning, in terms of big gaps. So that it is a situation that is affecting many institutions in the country.
Glad you said that. Just a quick question, Madam Chair, and to follow my chairman's lead. Since you're a woman of candor, you mentioned culture change. And culture change starts with sound leadership in any organization.
Yeah.
But to be holistic in our line of questioning today, my final question is, we've dealt a lot with the shortcomings, and based on the reports and your articulation of your assessments, is there some element based on your assessments of the police service, or the leadership of the police service, to be fair to them, that the public or this committee may not have identified past will to do so or capacity that may be hindering this or past commissioners to elicit the kind of change that you may have recommended or that is necessary?
I think that to answer very quickly, one of the things that comes to my mind as you mentioned that is the question of the recruitment, where to have a caliber of or cadre of police officers that can eventually rise to the leadership, I think you have to recruit from across the society. And as it is the way the police service is right now, the recruitment starts, with your 5 O-levels, and they don't take in cadets and things like that that they would have done previous to 1970. That needs to be changed, because then you would have a cross-section of the society wanting to be police officers. I mean, that's something that we have to change.
Does that also include a better system of integration of non-uniform professionals to assist in transformation? Because the Manpower audit also indicated that though they are professionals, there is a significant integration issue with non-uniform professionals, and in any modern-day contemporary organization, quasi-military or not, to think that they can operate without the intellectual capacity that may come from outside is foolhardy, or seems foolhardy to me.
I think that is an excellent observation, and that needs to be integrated, because there is a disconnect between the civilian staff and the TTPS itself. So that, I think, is something that would definitely be a plus.
We just want to make a comment on your culture, You said culture is hard to change, and I agree that culture is hard to change. But culture is only hard to change in the absence of an appropriate sanction and reward mechanism. I am one that strongly believes that if you want to change a culture, if you put an appropriate reward and sanction mechanism, you could effectively change a culture within a very short space of time. So the fact that the culture has been there and continue to be there at one time, I want to submit that has existed because we have not been able to have appropriate sanction and reward put in place. And that is where the heart of the problem. I make that submission. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Mr. Hunt, I agree fully with you. And what I would like to add very quickly is that in terms of a commission and our thinking through intellectually how we are going to deal with this new team, whether it is a team of new players, I'm talking about the selection now, the TTPS is poised at this point in time, given this turnover, whether it is the same players or new players, But you're talking about the selection of a commissioner of police and deputy appointed commissioner of police and deputy commissioners of police. And business cannot continue as usual. We are going to, I know you said it's Christmas, we are also doing a retreat where we have to sit and work out and fine-tune how we are going to address these issues, because business cannot continue as usual.
And I want to also just confirm, I mean, you are also, it is very clear to me, and I mean, that under the present structure, since 2007 and the change, that the ability, or the, the person that is responsible after post-2007 for the rewarding and sanctioning of officers below the rank of assistant police commissioner is the responsibility of the commissioner. That's what it is since post-2007. That's my interpretation. Is that what it is?
Below the rank of deputy.
Deputy.
So he, and that's one of the recommendations of the multi-sector report, that we go down lower. And just indulge me for 1 second, because when I first came on board, those are things that I asked about. I would like to see the seniority list. Let's go down, because you want to see how this organization is operating. We can't just look at things on the surface. You have to get into the bowels of how the management is going on. And it's something we've been doing slowly but surely. And I know it sounds as if we're turning slowly, but we are doing it and asking for seniority lists and looking at things, you know, going right down, at least in terms of the first division.
Okay, all right. But again, as it is now, from a sanctioning and reward mechanism, as it is now, the person that has the responsibility for rewarding and sanctioning people in the police service below the level of the deputy commissioner,
yes,
is the commissioner of police.
Yes, it is.
That's their responsibility.
Yes.
Okay then, thank you.
Well, it appears as though we have directed to you all of the questions that we had in our bosoms. It only appears there are many more, but we keep our eyes on the time and other such things. But we would like, Madam Chair and Madam DPA and your respective teams, to thank you very kindly for being with us this afternoon. In relation to the members of the Police Service Commission, we would like to thank you for your service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We found the deliberations this afternoon to be illuminating. We learned a little more about what appeared beforehand to be a cloistered, secret operation. I think the public who would have heard you today would have better understood what you do, what you are supposed to do, the troubles you have in trying to do it, your dependence rather than independence on the public, the DPA and what have you. So we are very thankful for all of this, and your suggestions today and your intervention today will inform the report that we are aiming to issue to the Parliament for the swift implementation of some of the recommendations or the recommendations of the police manpower, the final manpower audit report. So we would like to thank you. We would like, well ahead of Christmas, to wish you a happy holiday. And we look forward to our continued collaboration. If needs be, we will ask you to be with us again, naturally. And we certainly look forward to two things, as you have promised, Madam Chair: an indication as to the number of appeals you are actually treating within the past few years. That is important. And as well, your recommendations based on your experience for the better management of the police service in light of the final audit report led by the as drafted by the Police Manpower Audit Committee. So we would like to thank you very much, and we bid you farewell and safe travels to your respective workplaces.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Police Service Commission and the Service Commission's department, let me take this opportunity to wish all of you all a safe and happy Christmas, and I hope that it is peaceful, and that with the coming of the new year 2018, that we are able to be peaceful in our hearts and transfer that to the country in terms of improving the safety and security needs of Trinidad and Tobago. We are aware of our responsibility, and we assure you that we'll get the information to you sooner than later.
I have been reminded by the Secretary to this committee, in light of the festivity of the season, we have prepared some refreshments for you, not as sumptuous and as attractive as you might be accustomed to in your party.
Certainly not.
Certainly. You're very welcome to partake of them. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Excuse? Gentlemen, those documents, before